I'm Justin Mott, welcome to my home in Hanoi, Vietnam, and today I'm going to talk about how to choose the right camera system. More importantly, how to choose the right camera system for you. Now, this is not going to end with me telling you to buy this exact camera at this exact price at this exact time. You're going to actually have to figure that out for yourself. But why you should watch? Because I'm going to help guide you. I'm going to give you some useful tips, some things to just think about, some things to ponder, some things to reflect on before you make that purchase. Now, this is really for anyone. Someone just looking to buy a camera to take pictures of their kids or take as a travel camera, or pro looking to upgrade to a new system, or an amateur looking to go from amateur to pro. These little bits of advice are just things you need to think about before you make that decision, before you buy your first camera system or just before you buy your next camera system. So stay tuned. The first piece of advice I'm going to give you is to be honest with yourself. Actually sit down, you can stand up if you want, get a piece of paper, get a pen, and actually list out the functionalities that you think you need. And then really, after you list those functionalities, then truly be honest with yourself. For example, do you need a camera that shoots video? Maybe, maybe not. Do you need a camera that shoots video and shoots 4K? Do you need 6K? Do you need 8K? For most of you, probably not. Do you need in-camera stabilization? Maybe some of you, maybe not. Honestly, really, truly think about it. For video functionality, are you going to shoot video? And if so, think about all the things that go along with that. I'm not trying to discourage people. I think it's great for people that want to learn and people that want to grow into video. But before you buy a stills camera that has all these great functions for video that you will be paying for, are you going to use those functions, and are you going to do all the things that go along with the process of shooting video? Are you going to get a tripod to be stabilized? Are you going to buy a gimbal? Are you going to learn Adobe Premiere Pro or Final Cut, like learn all the editing and exporting? Where are you going to put these videos? Are you going to publish them out there? Just be honest with yourself. Do you really think you're going to do this? You should know yourself at this point in your life, whatever point you're at. I hope you know yourself. Will you learn these things? Some of you, again, yes. Some of you, maybe not. So just sit down, be honest with yourself, and then from there, that should give you a good base of the functions you need and the functions you don't need in a camera. And the same goes for megapixels. Do you really need 50 megapixels? Do you even need 30 megapixels? Some of you might be fine with 12 megapixels. Honestly, like really, megapixels aren't that big of a deal. I've used this little GR3 here camera, which is about 24 megapixels for assignments for the New York Times. It's been printed in a global publication. I've printed giant prints with it. Will you print images? That's another thing to think about. Indeed, 9% of you probably will never ever print your images, so think about that. And even if you do, you can get great prints out of even your iPhone. I've printed images for professional brochures out of my iPhone. So really, megapixels aren't that big of a deal for most of you. Now for me, it does come in handy sometimes. That's why I have this camera here. This is a 50 megapixel Hasselblad, but this makes sense for me in my commercial work. I do giant ad campaigns, so I shoot images that might end up on a billboard sometime, or at least printed really, really big. So 50 megapixels and having a gigantic sensor does matter to me. Does it matter to you? And while you're being honest with yourself, think about what you're likely to carry with you. Are you likely to take a system like this, the Canon 5D, and take 5 lenses with you that will require its own giant shoulder bag or roller bag or a backpack or something like that? Is that something you would do? Or is that something that you would do like one day and then the rest of the time you would just leave it and let it sit there? If you're likely to carry that around, or you're not likely to take a separate bag for your kit, then consider something a little bit smaller, like a little point and shoot, or, you know, Leicas are expensive, but just anything in that size. I'm not trying to push any particular brands here. Think about all those things. So you're thinking about video, you're thinking about functions, what functions you need, you're thinking about size. Size is very important. Insert joke here, but size is really important. If you are likely to just put a small camera in your purse or your little shoulder bag, or just in your sling bag that you take with your laptop, then get something that will fit in there. The bags you carry, and just know yourself and be honest with yourself. So that's the first thing. So once you're honest with yourself, you've made this list of functions that you could use, you've made these things that you need and that you don't need, and you've thought about size, then the next thing is budget. Now, I can't give you a clear idea for budget. I wish I could say you need to spend $1,000. And you need to spend $8,000, and you need to spend $400. I don't know you all. I'd like to get to know you guys, but I don't know you. Budget has to come from you. Now, a couple things just to factor in, like, yes, if you think you're gonna use a camera just to take pictures every once in a while traveling, something that's gonna stick in your bag, then maybe you only need to spend a few $100s on a point and shoot. If you think you're going to grow from amateur photographer to pro photographer, then pick a system that you can grow into, which I'll get into later. But really, the budget really has to come from you because everyone's going to be different. Some people think it would be outrageous to spend $8,000 on a digital camera here, this Leica M10D that doesn't even have an LCD screen. It doesn't even come with a lens. The lens itself is $5,000. That might seem obnoxious and ridiculous to some of you. For me, it works because I use this camera a ton. I use it for my personal project. I love everything about this camera, the files, the aesthetic, so it does work for me. And some people just need something more compact that fits in their bag. The budget has to come from you. You have to think about your income, and then you have to think about the functions that I talked about before. So once you make that list, once you understand the size and once you understand the system, then you can kind of figure out the budget based on that. Do a little bit of research. For most of you is to stick with the big brands. Like Sony is constantly coming out with new stuff. Their tech seems to be great. They're always evolving. Canon is always coming out with new stuff. Nikon, they're all very comparable. They just keep beating each other. Like one will top the other one, then the other one will top the other one. So you really can't go wrong. Next thing is, what do you buy? So you've kind of considered size, you've considered the price, you consider the functionality. Now, what do? Do you go mirrorless? Do you go full frame? Do you go medium format? Do you go with a point and shoot? They're all going to do a great job. Like if you take nice pictures, if you've taken a nice shot, these will do the job well for you. What you need to consider is buying a system that you can grow into if you want to grow as a photographer. If you think I just want a better camera than my phone, something to take around with you, that's one thing. Whether you're a professional photographer that's trying to grow and get even better within your profession or try different things with your photography, or you're an amateur going from amateur to pro, buy a system that you can grow into. So that would mean buying a system with interchangeable lenses. That's a great way to start. So if you think you're going to grow, then get a camera that you can swap out lenses, because camera bodies, the technology is changing constantly. Every few years they're coming out with new bodies, but you'll notice a lot of these lenses, they will hold their value and the technology will stay the same for a long time. I have lenses that I've been using for 15 years that are perfectly fine. I recommend for those of you that don't think you're going to learn the intricacies of photography, you're not going to grow into shooting manually, you're not going to buy more lenses, to use something simple that comes with a built-in lens, that's fine. For those of you that think you're going to grow, then buy an interchangeable lens system. So my next point is to consider buying a used camera. You can get great deals on older cameras that are like one generation behind, because if you really don't need those functions, you could save like 30% on a camera or 40% on a camera. Then you can use that money to buy nicer glass. An older model, then buy the used one and take that $500 and buy a nice piece of glass. That will really improve your photography a lot more than any camera will. Having a nice piece of glass, you'll see that right away in your camera. So like investing in good glass and spending that money you would on a new camera, using that difference of that money to buy some nice glass, some nice lenses, will help your photography out quite a bit. And used cameras, every different market is a little bit different. Buying on eBay, buying in different countries, it can be tricky. I would recommend, if you can, meet with the person, pick the camera up, test it out for a little bit, look for fungus in the lenses. If you're in an area with a lot of humidity, just check it out, make sure it's functionally working well, look at the glass, make sure the camera's not marked up, see how the photographer uses them. Actually, buying cameras from photographers like me isn't always a great idea, because we use them really, really hard and we wear them in, but just kind of get a feel for how they've used them. A lot of cameras do have technology where you can put a memory card in and get a shutter count. That could be important for certain cameras, so look into that stuff, but if you can feel it. But definitely consider used as an option. Honestly, everyone wants the latest and greatest, but you've already sat down, you've already been honest with yourself. You know what functions you need and what functions you don't, so use that money to buy nicer glass. I'm telling you, it will help you, it will benefit you in the long run. Next piece of advice I would say, there's a lot of cameras that come out like new systems and new formats. Like I remember when mirrorless was new, I remember when APC was new, I remember when all these different kind of systems were new. So I remember even when this Hasselblad was new, this X1D system with the XCD lenses. Generations of a new system tend to be buggy. That Hasselblad system had a lot of bugs in it, and they were fixed with firmware. But any bit of technology, if it's the first of its kind, the first generation, usually kind of sucks, or it takes time for them to update it. So just consider that. Also consider, is this a big brand that has the money behind it to make this system grow? Like the Hasselblad, I was nervous when I bought it because they only had 2 lenses out when I first bought this camera, and that was it. Now, if they just cut it out, I would have been screwed. Luckily for me, it did sell well and it did grow into a bigger kit. Now there's a bunch of different lenses and they have new models of the camera. But if it's something gimmicky, a new system that comes out and it's not by one of the big brands, and you know what the big brands are, I don't need to list them all. Big brands, they will invest in it and they will make that system grow. So, some of these gimmicky systems, be careful because they might cancel. You might be stuck with a bunch of lenses that aren't compatible, or you might be stuck with a whole system that just gets outdated in a couple years. So just do a little research and maybe just avoid these first generation systems if you can. Piece of advice is less is more. Really, I know people get into photography, they're excited, they've gone for their phone or they've gone for their point and shoot, and now they just want to jump into a digital SLR system or a mirrorless system, and they want to buy every single lens out there. They want the 70-200, they want the 16-35, the 24-70, 6 different prime lenses. Take it easy. take a breath. Like, really, less is more. Less will make you grow with your photography. The entire first year of assignments, my first year as a professional photographer, I was living in Cambodia, then later in Vietnam. I did my first entire year of assignments all over Asia. I probably did about 20 assignments that year for the New York Times, and I traveled everywhere. And I just had one Canon 5D, the original 5D, and a 35mm lens. And then later I bought a fixed 100 because I like the prime system, and every once in a while I want a longer lens. Body and one camera made me move more as a photographer. It made me think more as a photographer. It made me more likely to always have my camera on me. It gave me more energy to shoot full and long days. It just made me think differently. Having all that gear to choose from sometimes can actually work against you. You're overthinking things too much. Your work doesn't flow well together. So you might think you need all this gear, but you probably don't. Start with something simple. Start with one camera. Start with one lens, a prime lens. If you're going interchangeable lenses, try a prime lens. Try that out. See what that's like. Don't overspend in the beginning. You don't need all that gear. Just start slow. What happens with the gear stuff is people buy a camera and they buy a lens, and then they're not good enough right away, or they're not getting enough likes, or they're not getting the kind of work they get, and they just grow impatient. So you think like, oh, I need to get a better camera, or I need to get more lenses. Take it easy, and this is going to be hard to hear, but it's not actually the megapixels, it's not the latest camera, it's not bigger lenses or more lenses, it's you, or it's just time. You just need time to grow, so just give it time, be patient. Spending on new gear is not going to make you better. What you should be doing is, instead of spending money on gear, spend time on your photography. Go out and shoot, go out and practice, go out and work on your craft. It's so easy. People think that's the quick fix, but it's not. It really isn't. It's just like buying a piece of exercise equipment or buying like 6 treadmills. Isn't going to make you get in more shape. What's going to get you in better shape is just using that one treadmill that you have every single day, and exercising and diet, that kind of stuff. Sounds weird coming from me, but you know what I mean. That's a weird analogy. But and the last piece of advice I'm going to give you is, once you've made that decision, once you've got your budget in mind, you've figured out what cameras work within that budget, right? You've got it down to like 2 different camera systems. You figured out, okay, I want a mirrorless camera, and I'm going to start with a 35mm lens. That's what I'm going to do, is find a way to go and use that camera for a day if you can. Now, a lot of camera shops aren't going to loan you a camera and let you take it out for a day, but if you have a friend, ask them to borrow it, or if you can just go to the shop, really pick it up, see what that camera feels like in your hand, go through the navigation system, make sure it's something you're not totally overwhelmed with. If you are, that's also okay too. There's great tutorials online on how to understand your menu system, and some are more complex than others, but figure out what that camera feels like in your hand. Understand the weight of that camera. Understand if you're likely to carry that camera, if you need a separate bag, and if you do need a separate bag, are you the kind of person that's going to take a separate bag? All those things I talked about before, but the more time you can spend with that camera before you buy it, the better. So try to download the files from that camera. That's important. You will notice like there's not a huge difference. Unless you're really like at the highest level of professional photography, you're not going to notice like a huge difference between files of cameras. You're not going to notice a huge difference between like 24 megapixels and 30 megapixels, or even 12 megapixels. Like, honestly, really, unless you're printing these files, you're not going to notice a big difference. So if you can get your hands on this camera ahead of time, if you can get your hands on the files, not like hands on the files, but if you can download the files, play around a little bit, or really pick up the camera for a day, play around with it, see what it feels like in your hand, see if you like actually using it, and that should help you make your final decisions. So again, yeah, sorry, I'm not going to tell you exactly which camera to buy at exactly which budget. There's plenty of websites out there, but everyone is so different. There's just so many different variables out there. So this was just meant to just guide you, hopefully guide you towards one direction. I'm not telling you which system or which brand to buy. There's a lot of great brands out there to buy, but you're going to hear a lot of negativity. There's people that are just so angry about certain cameras and certain things. So listen, block out all that noise about what's the best system for you based on the things that I told you today, and then you can just make a well-informed decision. So thank you guys, I appreciate it. I'd love to hear what camera systems you guys bought that you've been disappointed with or that you've been happy with. You can add that in the comments section. Appreciate you listening to this today, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Have a great day, guys. Bye.